Hey guys, so in this video today we are going to be talking about cortisol, which is one of the hormones that are affected by exercise and will also affect how your body works when there's too much or too little of them. So today we're going to talk about cortisol, which is also known as the stress hormone, and it is also a steroid. Okay, so if you have corticosteroids, they are injecting effectively cortisol into your system. Okay, so it's not all bad. It's not a demon hormone. We often hear about our cortisol levels, stress levels being high, but in some cases we actually need that to be the case for our body to make adaptive changes. So as we go in, the causes of cortisol or stress can be either physical, mental, emotional, or prolonged low blood sugar, which is not the same as fasting. Okay, so as we know, physical stress, exercise, movement, injury, things like that. Okay, these are physical stresses on the body. Mental stress, which can be stress work, it can be taking on too many jobs, feeling overwhelmed, and things like that. Emotional stress is the subdivision of mental. I like to break the two up because sometimes mental stress is very different to emotional stress. So breakups, family problems, personal issues and things like that would come under emotional stress. And then prolonged low blood sugar. So if you are in a state where you're not eating for long periods of time, certain mental health issues, anorexia, bulimia, things like that, where you are basically dropping your blood sugar for a very long period of time, and also diabetics as well, when their blood sugar levels plummet, that can then raise your cortisol levels as well. The reason I say it's not the same as fasting is actually you can control fast for quite a long period of time before the cortisol really takes in. So this is really the long-term negative effects, or medical in the case of diabetes. So pros, because there are some pros to this, and they are quite important pros that our body takes up when we have cortisol in our system. So in the short term, must be short term, it improves glyconeolysis, which is the use of glucose in the contraction of muscles and the transport of glucose from the liver to be used in the cells. So when we exercise, we up our cortisol levels because we are putting ourselves under physical stress. Okay, what our body then does is go, right, muscles are contracting, they need energy, we release glucose to aid in the contraction of muscles, and then also what we're going to do is transport more glucose from the liver into the cells so that there is more ready energy available. So this is great when you're running away from something, or as a caveman, when you're trying to hunt your food or anything else like that, because your body basically is thinking, ooh, okay, something's going on, we need energy from that, which is why also where the low blood sugar comes in, because it thinks you're exercising in a sense, I suppose, just to put it in a simple way. Your blood sugar levels drops, and means your energy's gone, therefore we need more of it. It also reduces inflammation by suppressing the immune system. Now, you may have heard me say this before. If you haven't, you have to be careful once you've done a heavy exercise session, because you are actually slightly more susceptible to colds and bugs after a very heavy exercise or prolonged exercise session, because it lowers your immune system. Now, this is also good because it reduces inflammation caused by the stress of exercise. So when we get to points of like overtraining, you're not really overtraining, you're under recovering, because if you think the inflammation that comes from exercise is being reduced all the time and suppressing your immune system, that's why you start feeling rough and why things go wrong. So, you know, you need it in short term, but if you're constantly bombarding yourself with this type of stress, it's not going to do your body any good. Also, what it does is create a fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, so your three main reactions: memory for survival events, and it also allows adrenaline release. So in the sense of, if you touch something that's hot, instant adrenaline spike, pull the hand away. Cortisol burns that into your memory and goes, that was bad, don't do that again. Okay, so you memorize these things. Tripping over, not watching where you're going, short, sharp, very rational things. Cortisol etches that into your memory to go, don't do that again, because it's also a learning hormone, okay? It stops you from dying, basically, in the short term, which is what we obviously need to survive, which is great. From a survival perspective, it's the only reason we got where we were. Don't go in the water when it's too cold. don't touch that because it's hot. And then slowly but surely those memories are passed on, and that's how you learn not to do those things, which is why, strangely enough, as children, the more stressful, little mini stressful experiences you have, the better well adjusted you are to dealing with things, because your body's actually putting them in place. As you can see from this top part of this, and key here being short term, this is great in small doses, but you're already hopefully beginning to see how all of these things over a long period of time are not going to be great. We don't want to be releasing glucose all the time into the cells. We don't want to be releasing glucose into the muscles all the time. We don't want our inflammation responses reduced all the time. And we don't want to be permanently on edge in these fight, flight or freeze memory situations, okay? So in a short term, through exercise, learning things emotionally but recovering well, these are very crucial and beneficial things that come from having cortisol in your system. But as we're going to see in a minute, it creeping out into longer periods is not going to be great. So let's go to the long term, or the negatives. Counteracts insulin, leading to hyperglycemia and insulin resistance. Now, as you can see here, it improves glyconeolysis, which is the use of glucose. But where it counteracts insulin, which then figures out how much of it you need to use because it's constantly putting glucose into your cells, we then enter this hyperglycemia phase. Okay, stress brings more glucose into the cells, which then means that your sugar levels go up. And if you have insulin issues anyway, which will then lead to insulin resistance. So if you're highly stressed, you actually run your risk of getting into type 2 diabetes more, because it's constantly bombarding your body with this stuff because it feels it needs to do things. It's not great, okay? So that's why stress management is one of the biggest parts of training, and one of the biggest things I try and get my clients to manage and do, and why I got into mental health as well, because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that you don't see, and as much as exercise makes you feel good, there's other things you need to regulate. Next, it reduces bone formation, which is basically osteoporosis, and health by removing potassium, introducing sodium to the cells, and it also reduces calcium absorption. So if you are stressed, your bones effectively don't take up the calcium they need to repair themselves. You're taking potassium out of the system and replacing it with sodium, and you're just reducing bone formation as a whole. So being stressed is bad for bone health. Now, obviously, that kind of goes without saying. You need your bones to work, because if you don't have the structure. So high stress at a younger age can, especially in females who are prone to osteoporosis, can lead into the early onset of it, because your body is basically eating itself. When you get stressed for too long, your body falls apart. Cortisol will eat at your body, okay? Which is why chronic stress is a huge issue. Okay, this is why people are now looking so much into mental health. Hopefully, I feel is the main reason, because stress over a long period of time is not great. It's not great. Think of it kind of like an acid, right? So there are places that use acid to etch patterns onto things. Now, it sounds like a weird analogy, but small amounts of it are great. They're very pretty. You can use it to your advantage. If you leave that thing dripping all the time, it's just going to burn a hole through whatever it's in there. So while it's creating memories and patterns across the brain and giving your body information and doing what it needs to do, you leave that tap on, it's just going to bore through, and it's not great. Then it prevents muscle growth by inhibiting protein synthesis, which is basically the process where the body takes protein, digests it, breaks it down into amino acids, and sends those amino acids to wherever they need to go. So it basically stops that from happening. If you are stressed, or the overtraining principle, under recovering, your muscles stop growing. So when you are chronically stressed or you overwork out, that's why all of a sudden you see diminishing return, because you're not allowing your body to flush the cortisol out and actually make changes. You're just constantly dripping it all the way into your system. So your muscles will actually shrink. So being stressed and doing too much physical stress would actually cause your muscles to drop down. And obviously we don't want that. We want to prolong as much muscle growth as we can. And also brings down collagen, which is for joint health, and it stops the regulation of it. So being stressed for too long physically, mentally, emotionally will cause actual quite detrimental effects to the body as a whole. And then finally, probably the scariest one, which is really links into the mental health part of things. Destroys the hypothalamus in the brain, affecting memory and learning. Now, a traumatic event, if you can't rationalize it, which is basically anxiety, which causes prolonged anxiety and PTSD. What happens is that amount of stress that your body's constantly under, because you're constantly on edge thinking something's going to happen, causes your brain to effectively start melting. The cortisol will eat away at the memory part of your brain because it can't find out where the memory is, but it knows it doesn't want it in there. So off it goes. So that's why when you're trying, especially sometimes in the beginning or further on down the line, when you're trying to hash out why you're in this place, what happened, what was the events that happened, you find it very hard to actually recall the event because your body is effectively trying to burn the documents in the back of your head, right? So where those memories are kept, the traumatic event, the prolonged experience, everything that your body is trying to process, if it can't process it, it erases it. So it's kind of like the cop-out. If it didn't happen, we don't have to deal with it. And that's what the brain does. The cortisol hormone burns out the hypothalamus, which makes it harder to remember things, which means your learning is dipped, which is why stressful experiences in children can affect their learning and memory retention, and in adults can stop you from remembering certain things because your body's basically going, it didn't happen, it's easier if it didn't happen, let's get rid of it. Okay, so cortisol, it has its good points and we need it. Okay, it is a control hormone, it's one of the master hormones, which I'll be going through in this section as well, along with insulin, dopamine, serotonin and other things. Okay, but in short term, it's great because it helps us grow muscle, it helps us learn, it helps us stop dying, it promotes all of these good things and gives us the energy we need. Cortisol is actually involved in the waking process because when the sunlight hits your skin, we absorb sunlight through the skin. It also starts reacting with cortisol, which brings us up, okay? That's why having an alarm clock that alarms you, hence the term alarm clock, actually creates a spike in cortisol, which is why your heart rate races sometimes when your alarm goes off and when you feel a bit jittery and out of place because your body just goes bang into this, floods the body full of glucose, you start moving around, fight or flight system kicks in because that alarm is designed to do just that. If you find that's burning you out a little bit, then there are other methods that involve using lights to wake you up because, as I've just said, your body absorbs light and causes you to wake up because it thinks it's daytime, or you can have gentler alarms which want to coax you into waking up. So in short term, great, we need it. In long term, we must manage it, which is why we seek counselling, which is why exercise is a great release of cortisol because it gives you a rational output for stress and it helps you manage everything, but it also helps dump a lot of this because once you've exercised, if your recovery is great, you're regulating things nicely. Take this on board. It is really important that you understand what cortisol does because that way you can regulate it better. It's very easy to throw around saying, oh, my cortisol levels are up, that's why I'm doing X, Y, Z. But you have to understand why they're up and sometimes how you can get around it. Hope this helps everybody. Any questions, please let me know.